opinion sit on this? Has the Conservative Party lost what was once a very clear lead in this area?
Well, the honest truth is, Tom, that at least in the recent past, the Conservatives have been so far behind Labour in the polls, so far as people's perceptions of the competence of the Conservative Party in general is concerned, that you've been able to get polls that have asked people, 7, 8, 9, 10 issues, including immigration, and the Conservatives are behind on every one of them. The problem the Conservatives faced in the wake of Liz Truss's administration is the knock to the party's reputation for competence in general. That said, I think the second thing one needs to understand about the issue of migrants in particular, the migrants coming across the English Channel, how they should be treated, and in particular the government's at least original proposed resolution of this, which was that anybody who comes to the UK over the Channel would be sent to Rwanda to have their asylum application processed. That just divides the public pretty much down the middle. For the most part, Conservative supporters think this is a good idea. Opposition voters tend to think it's a bad idea. Now, to that extent, at least, it's quite a good issue for the Conservatives potentially, because at least it helps them to reconnect with their core vote. On the other hand, it's not necessarily an election-winning strategy in that it is an issue where there are quite a lot of voters who are antagonistic to what the government is doing, as well as those who are supportive of it.
And yet, for some areas, the government seems to, under Rishi Sunak, have recovered a little bit of ground in the last couple of days. There was one poll that showed that on the economy, for example, really crucial question there, the Conservative Party has now slipped ahead of the Labour Party. Are there signs of recovery here? Or, I suppose the headline figures are still a very, very big gap.
Well, yes. Let's look at the headline figures first, then come back to what you were specifically referring to. So, two things are clear. One is that Mr. Sunak is an awful lot more popular than Liz Truss was. And indeed, when voters are being asked to choose between him and Sir Keir Starmer as a Prime Minister, the polls that have been done in the last week have pretty much had them neck and neck. So, and Mr. Sunak in particular is widely regarded as being a competent Prime Minister, even by those who are not inclined to support the Conservative Party, although they also tend to feel he's somewhat out of touch. So I think there is no doubt that Mr. Sunak's personal political position is an awful lot stronger than that of his predecessor. So far, however, so far as the headline voting intention is concerned, the impact of this on the Conservatives has been somewhat muted, and perhaps rather less we might have expected. We've had 7 opinion polls done in the last week by companies who also polled in the last week of Liz Truss's administration. They, on average, had the Conservative vote up by 4 points, Labour down by 3. But that still means that Labour have an average lead in the polls of around 25 points, i.e., much more than enough than is required for them to be able to get an overall majority. But then, yes, as you mentioned, specifically on the issue of the economy, well, we've only so far had a scattering of evidence. Certainly the evidence of the opinion poll on Sunday, which you're referring to, was quite striking in that actually the Conservatives were more likely to regard as being competent on the economy than virtually anything else. Although, again, I think one should note there that the word Rishi Sunak was attached to that question, and that could make a difference. BMG, for example, in the poll that came out earlier in the weekend, asked people both about which party was best on the economy and then also which leader was best on the economy. And on the party question, Labour were well ahead. On the leader question, Mr. Sunak was well ahead. So again, there's this question of to what extent is the personal respect that people have for Mr. Sunak as a Prime Minister, and perhaps particularly with respect to the economy as a former Chancellor, how far this is going to translate into people beginning to think rather more favourably of the Conservative Party as an institution. I think certainly that's the trick that Mr. Sunak has to perform. He has to persuade people that their regard for him as an individual should be transferred to his party. So far, at least, that's a project that's only made a degree of progress, and certainly not enough to put the Conservatives back to being competitive with the Labour Party more broadly.
Yes.